What is up, friends? Today I'm going to continue my retroactive BoJack Horseman reviews with Season 2, so let's get into it. And just a reminder, I'll be referencing later seasons of BoJack during this review, so spoilers for Seasons 1 through 5. The opening scene of Season 2 shows BoJack watching Secretariat on the Dick Cavett show, which we as an audience saw at the end of Season 1. We see that while Secretariat is reading BoJack's letter and giving him advice, BoJack's parents are viciously fighting in the other room. Beatrice comes into the room and tells BoJack that he ruined her, and that he better grow up to be something great. We saw some of this negative reinforcement from Beatrice back in Season 1, and this one really informs some of BoJack's life motivations. BoJack's life is in a very different place in Season 2 than it was at the beginning of Season 1. He's got his dream role in Secretariat, and we can see that he's trying to make big changes to reflect this new place in life. He's listening to a self-help audiobook to help adjust his attitude, and we even see BoJack making a healthy fruit smoothie. And if you remember back in the first episode of the series, his smoothie was just made out of carrots, vodka, and pills. His first day on set, BoJack actually just fails miserably to deliver his lines.
What are you doing here?
I also love how Kelsey Jennings adores Todd for some reason. It's not really explained, but this is actually the second director we've seen who took to Todd immediately, the first being Quentin Tarantulino. Throughout the episode, BoJack ignores phone calls from his mother, and we actually see a flashback of Beatrice watching BoJack perform on Horsin' Around. They have lunch together afterward, where Beatrice is incredibly dismissive of BoJack's work. She says it wasn't Ibsen, which is exactly what BoJack said back in the Charlie Rose interview that opened the entire series. We can see how that negative reinforcement from Beatrice continues to have an effect on BoJack even as an adult. A successful adult at that. He became a famous TV star, but that still wasn't enough to impress his mother. In response to his mother's indifference, he yells for the servers to bring him alcohol, which I think is representative of BoJack giving up on living up to his mother's impossible expectations. We learned in Season 1 that before Horsin' Around, BoJack didn't drink at all, but after he became famous, he starts to consume regularly. Before his success, he may have felt that making it in Hollywood would fulfill him, but as we know, that did not happen, which likely helped lead to his alcohol abuse. We're introduced to another agent of Vigor named Rutabaga Rabowitz, who has a friendship with Princess Carolyn. Rutabaga is seriously hilarious, one of my favorite characters in the show, and he's played by the outstanding Ben Schwartz, who is quickly becoming one of the biggest voice actors out there. I mean, now he's on DuckTales and the new Ninja Turtles show, and he's gonna be Sonic? That's crazy. I love Rutabaga and PC's chemistry, but we quickly see Rutabaga's true colors as he screws her over after she gives him some inside info. Towards the end of the episode, BoJack is still listening to Brand New Attitude when he finally decides to speak with his mom. She tells him that she read his book and hits him one more time with that negative reinforcement. That she knows he wants to be happy, but he never will be.
You're BoJack Horseman. There's no cure for that.
After BoJack hangs up the phone, he nails his line.
What are you doing here?
The sad irony here is that without that broken part of himself, BoJack is doomed to fail. He wants to be happy, and he makes efforts to change his attitude and become happy, but he can't play his dream role of Secretariat without pulling from that broken place that's been reinforced by his mother his entire life. Throughout the season, we hear BoJack repeat the same line over and over.
What are you doing here? What are you doing here? What are you doing here? What are you doing here?
The second episode jumps into a lighter, more fun tone that introduces one of my favorite guest characters, Wanda, played by the legendary Lisa Kudrow, who is the best friend, her and Joey. BoJack is struggling in the dating scene after his book is released because everyone now knows intimate details about his life before they even meet him, and this is why Wanda becomes so enticing to him. She recently woke up from a 30-year coma and therefore has no idea who BoJack is. At the end of the episode, BoJack hastily asks Wanda to move in with him. She actually says yes, which probably wasn't the smartest decision for BoJack. I loved Todd's Disneyland story in this episode, especially how he gets out of the copyright infringement.
Is it possible maybe when the other guys tried to copyright the name Disneyland, they wrote down something else by mistake?
So stupid and so funny. I also like the further development of Todd and Mr. Peanut Butter's friendship, which is something I'd like to see them get back into in the future seasons. The third episode is called Still Broken and takes place at Herb Kazaz's funeral, who is eulogized by the great Henry Winkler, and I'm sure all of you remember Henry Winkler from that one episode of Law & Order SVU. BoJack and the grown-up cast of Horsin' Around go on a treasure hunt to track down Herb's gold. The episode gives us some good flashbacks to the Horsin' Around days, and it was kind of a bummer to see how tight the cast was when the show just started. Herb's insistence that they remain a family was really nice, and it makes me wonder if they'd have all been better people if Herb had never been fired from the show. I really enjoyed seeing the cast come together, what would turn out to be the final time, even though it also came with this depressing piece of foreshadowing.
Probably won't even see each other again until the next funeral.
The fourth episode is called After the Party and has an interesting interesting narrative structure. It opens with Mr. Peanut Butter and Diane coming home from what Diane describes as a perfect birthday, only to reveal a massive surprise party, just about the last thing Diane would have wanted. The two end up getting in a huge fight, causing everyone to leave the party, and we subsequently see 3 different stories that take place simultaneously after the party. Princess Carolyn and Todd nearly run over the kid who seems to be the top half of Vincent Adultman, and the kid whose name is Kevin shows up at PC's house and tries to keep up the charade to much hilarity. Vincent Adultman is just such a fucking funny character, and I seriously can't get over the mental gymnastics that happen for everyone to continue believing he's an actual adult. At the end of the episode, PC and Vincent break up, and this is pretty much the last we see of Vincent Adultman in the entire show. I really hope he returns at some point in the future, a few years older maybe. I've always thought that this series would be a good candidate for a significant time jump at some point, and if they ever did that, it would be really funny to see an actual adult Kevin catching up with Princess Carolyn, still trying to keep up the Vincent Adultman charade. Then we see the fallout between Mr. Peanut Butter and Diane, which again shows the cracks in their marriage that developed throughout the series. Mr. Peanut Butter is an interesting character. He clearly knows and understands Diane, and gave her the literal perfect birthday, but he couldn't stop there. He had to have a grand gesture and essentially ruin everything he did right. Episode 5 is called Chickens and is absolutely bonkers, and in this episode we learn that there are essentially animals that are bred to be stupid and slaughtered for food, which seems way more messed up when animals are actual people in this society. There must be more kinds of animals people breed just for meat, since meat is still eaten regularly in the BoJack universe. This kind of makes everyone in the BoJack universe a cannibal. Episode 6 is called Higher Love, and one of the best things I noticed on this rewatch is that Todd and Mr. Peanut Butter predicted that stupid Tag movie that came out earlier this year. PB Livin goes bankrupt, and Mr. Peanut Butter has to get a new job, but his agent dies while autoerotic asphyxiating himself. This episode also highlights some things that I've said about Princess Carolyn before. Every time she gets knocked down or finds herself behind the pack, she manages to find a way to come out on top. Even though she missed out on all of Ronnie Benito's big clients after his death, she nabs his biggest and most secret client, J.D. Salinger, and sells a huge show with his name attached, and gets her other new client, Mr. Peanut Butter, the hosting gig for that same show. And after she accomplishes all of that, she gets absolutely no recognition. I really enjoyed Rutabaga's movie star speech to hype up Carolyn. It's sort of like his own version of PC's Get Your Shit Together speech. But does the movie star speech hold true? Is Princess Carolyn the movie star of this story? I think PC's Get Your Shit Together speech is a little more helpful, though less inspiring. Rutabaga's story implies that no matter what, you're going to have a happy ending because you're the star of the movie. Princess Carolyn's speech puts your fate into your own hands, and I think that's much more useful in both the context of this story and in real life, and honestly a little bit truer to the philosophy of this show. Episode 207, Hank After Dark, started to explore Hollywood's issues with sexual harassment and assault before the Me Too movement was even a thing. When season 2 came out, Bill Cosby was dominating the headlines, and I think that inspired the Hank Hippopopolis storyline. It's sadly just incredibly representative of the issues that have permeated Hollywood culture for far, far too long. Of course, even though Diane is doing the right thing and calling out the allegations against Hank, she's painted as the bad guy by almost everyone. Even her friends and husband have issues with what she's doing, though they're mostly self-serving concerns, which is again representative of these issues in Hollywood. So many people have something to lose when a big name is accused of something horrible. Agents, managers, studios, directors, executives, writers, other actors, fans. Building an industry around broken people can lead to some really shitty realities. Episode 208 is called Let's Find Out and sees the release of J.D. Salinger's magnum opus, Hollywood Stars and Celebrities. What do they know? Do they know things? Let's find out. BoJack is one of the show's first contestants, which leads to some great on-screen drama between himself and Mr. Peanut Butter.
You want to talk about the time when you, my good friend, kissed my wife?
Despite this, Mr. Peanut Butter continued to make such genuine efforts to be BoJack's friend. I always found this to be a really interesting piece of character development for Mr. Peanut Butter, and part of me thinks that he's actually trying to become closer to BoJack for BoJack's sake more than his own sake. BoJack basically has the chance to give a massive amount of money to charity by winning the game show, but in an incredibly petty display, he loses it all to prove a point to Daniel Radcliffe. I think this is a really shitty thing that is probably overlooked in BoJack's long history of shitty things. Sure, there's a larger problem when the studio is willing to risk all of that money in the first place, but the fact that BoJack willfully ignored charitable needs to prove a petty point is really messed up. Episode 209 opens with Secretariat begging Nixon not to send him to Vietnam and striking a deal to send his own brother Jeffretariat to Vietnam in his place. Now, I honestly couldn't tell if Jeffretariat was a real person or not. Part of me thinks it was just a Nixon PR move to help support the war effort since we never actually see Jeffretariat, but the massive emotional crux of the Secretariat film was meant to relate to the death of his brother Jeffretariat. What do you guys think? think? Was Jeffertariat real or not? We also see a flashback where a very young BoJack tries one of Beatrice's cigarettes.
Oh, Jesus Christ, you can't even smoke a cigarette right? Don't you dare cry. Don't you ever cry.
We see here that Beatrice smothered BoJack's emotions at a young age, which affects his ability to emote on the set of Secretariat. Even though he still doesn't cry, Kelsey's direction about Secretariat clearly rings true to BoJack himself.
Because this is the moment you realize something inside you is broken.
BoJack feels broken and doesn't believe he can be fixed. Just like Beatrice told him in the first episode of the season, "You're BoJack Horseman. There's no cure for that." His mother's influence is so deeply ingrained in him in almost every facet of his life. It permeates his personal life, his professional life, and his mental state. And as he takes a drag of his cigarette alone after nailing the shot they needed, BoJack cries. Just like in 1972 in front of his mother, he smokes a cigarette, and he cries. I think this is the only time we see adult BoJack cry in the entire series. In episode 210, Yes and, Diane returns home from Cordovia embarrassed and beaten down. She crashes at BoJack's house, and this is the first time we really start to get a sense of how broken Diane is as well. We also start to see that Diane and BoJack are actually pretty similar, just a couple of decades removed. Diane had her major success in One Trick Pony and is struggling to find meaning in her life afterwards. BoJack struggled similarly after Horsing Around ended. Diane's presence at BoJack's house really starts to weigh on Wanda and strains their relationship, and by the end of the episode, they break up. During their breakup, Wanda says one of the most profound and helpful things I've ever heard in my life.
When you look at someone through rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags.
Sometimes it's just really hard to take off your own rose-colored glasses, but if you're willing to be uncomfortable for a moment, you're gonna see things a little bit more clearly. Todd's subplot involves him joining an improv cult, which was really fun, as Todd's silly adventures usually are. I loved that one of the things Todd improvised was zombie dentists, which later became an actual business Todd pursued in season 4. Todd asks BoJack to come to his improv graduation, and instead BoJack drives to New Mexico to see Charlotte. And we arrive once again at the infamous 11th episode of this season. This one is a little bit more straightforward than in any other season. In seasons 1, 3, 4, and 5, the narrative structure is unique, usually involving some sort of mind-altering state, but this one is just a gut punch of an episode. BoJack basically becomes a full-fledged member of Charlotte's family when he spends multiple months living in New Mexico. I loved seeing BoJack fall into family life again, even if he didn't have a traditional role in that family. It was reminiscent of the trip sequence during Downer Ending last season when BoJack imagined a life with Charlotte in Maine. They keep giving us a little taste of what a happy ending could be like for BoJack if this were any other show, but of course it all has to come crashing down eventually. I didn't love the entire idea of BoJack going to prom with Penny. It felt weird and creepy to me, especially because he was the one who suggested it, but I think this was probably what they were going for. I did sort of come around a little bit when it was all happening, since they portrayed the evening as such a fun and lighthearted time. BoJack doing his BoJack dance and getting booed off the stage was really funny, and it also reminded me of a dance from another popular adult cartoon.
Put your right foot forward and your left foot back, then fucking slide around like on a Nordic track.
And then of course, everything started to go horribly wrong. Maddie gets sick from the alcohol that BoJack bought them, and they leave her at a hospital, but not before BoJack pressures Pete into lying about where the alcohol came from. This was a pretty gross moment from BoJack and shows his dark side. He won't take responsibility for his actions and was even willing to intimidate and manipulate these kids so that he doesn't get in trouble. When Penny propositions BoJack and BoJack turns her down, I was pretty relieved. It was the thing I was worrying about most with the entire premise of the episode, but in that moment, I was happy BoJack did the right thing. His conversation with Charlotte after the dance was a pretty important character moment for BoJack, when he asks her if she still thinks LA is a tar pit.
It doesn't matter where you are, it's who you are. And that's not going to change whether you're in California or Maine or New Mexico.
Sadly, this reinforced BoJack's belief about himself that were instilled in him by his mother since he was a child. He didn't like who he was in LA, he came to New Mexico to try to be better and live a better life, but even after 2 great months, he made a dumb decision that led to Maddie going to the hospital. Instead of taking Charlotte's advice and just not participating in destructive behavior, he seeks out another Hail Mary happy ending. He selfishly begs Charlotte to run away with him, even though this would completely ruin her family. She turns him down and tells him it's time for him to leave New Mexico. The ending of this episode is still one of the shittiest moments of the entire series. BoJack once again tells Penny to go to bed after she propositions him yet again. Then Charlotte walks in as Penny is getting into bed with BoJack. I remember this was a major moment for me when watching for the first time, and it made me realize this show was going to continue to just punch me in the gut and subvert my hopes and expectations. This is also a major moment in BoJack's story arc and something I expect will continue to haunt him as we've seen through season 5. The final episode of the season is called Out to Sea and starts with a little Diane Ketchup who continues her self-destructive behavior squatting at BoJack's house. I think one moment in particular is pretty telling.
Idea for a new app. An undo button that could undo long amounts of time. 3 months, a year, a life.
She clearly has some intense long-standing regrets beyond her failed time in Cordovia. Princess Carolyn and Rutabaga start to move into their new agency, and I was a little heartbroken when they revealed that Rutabaga was trying to work things out with his wife. I really liked PC and Rutabaga as a couple, and the fact that he was jerking her around was a real bummer. I also would have loved to see more Ben Schwartz over the course of the series. The way PC took over the agency without Rutabaga was incredibly satisfying, especially after he burned his bridges with vigor, and a real vindicating moment for PC. Diane is offered a new job to ghostwrite tweets for Sixtina Aquafina at PC's new agency, and while meeting with Sixtina in a restaurant, Mr. Peanut Butter walks in and sees her. He calls her and asks her to come home in a really sweet scene, and we see Diane take a really big step to reclaim her own life. Even though she was gifted the job and encouraged by Mr. Peanut Butter to come home, she made the decision to get everything back on track despite her regrets and failures. BoJack's return to LA is met with the revelation that they've completely digitally replaced him in the Secretariat movie, even for the scenes that he'd completed filming. This will lead to a major awards push and massive success for his career, despite the fact that he didn't actually accomplish anything himself, which will not help BoJack's perpetual self-doubts. BoJack and Todd have a really wonderful scene together where Todd fondly remembers the first day he lived with BoJack, and then Todd moves out to join the Giggle Ship. I think Todd might understand BoJack better than most people. He spent more time with him than anyone over the past 10 years, and he's always tried to help and support him. And I really loved seeing BoJack care enough to rescue Todd from the clutches of the improv cult. Obviously, it also had a lot to do with BoJack being lonely and dependent on relationships like the one he has with Todd, but I really love their friendship when it's working, and this is one of their best episodes together.
Because you're my best friend, Todd.
I really hope that BoJack and Todd reconnect in season 6 and beyond. The season ends with a great scene where BoJack tries once again to run up the hill in front of his house, something he failed to do in the first episode of the season, and despite struggling and hating every second of it, he makes it to the top.
It gets easier.
Huh?
Every day it gets a little easier.
Yeah?
But you gotta do it every day. That's the hard part.
This is an important metaphor for BoJack. Being a better person can get easier for him, as long as he does it every single day. And while we don't necessarily see this play out in the series, in that moment, he recognizes this fact. And I think we should remain hopeful that he'll take this advice one day. And that ends an excellent second season of BoJack Horseman. This season dealt with a lot of BoJack's demons and trauma from his childhood and how that manifests in his life, career, and relationships. And going back to rewatch the first season with this new context actually gives a lot of insight into his decision making. Alright folks, thanks so much for tuning in to another retroactive BoJack Horseman review. If you like my analysis, please give me a like, comment below, and subscribe to the channel so you can see more of my content. And you can expect a season 3 review and some other BoJack videos in the near future. I'm also going to have a review for Big Mouth season 2 up either Friday or Saturday, and you guys do not want to miss that one. The season was seriously something special. I can't wait for you all to watch it. Catch you guys next time.
Johnny! Two Cellos!